Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. I know you understand the importance of the subject matter, but I want to emphasize that for us as a party, and certainly for us as a country, the issue of reading and literacy more broadly is critical. It's difficult for you to run a modern society with the rates of literacy that we're seeing. At the same time, we want to thank all the people working in the education system, especially those who have the courage to speak publicly about the challenges they're having. And the case in point, of course, being Pembroke Hall High School. We saw the numbers last week, and sadly, the case of Pembroke Hall, 70% of the grade 7 students. So let's get this straight. They've done PEP, they've matriculated to grade 7, and when tested, 70% are reading at grade 3 or below. 70%, 7 of every 10. And so it takes significant courage on the part of the school to make this public. And we know that this is not an individual case. This is not an isolated case. We do know, and we've seen in the media previously, the case of Holy Trinity, for example. But there are others, and even if they don't have 70%, a significant percentage of their students are reading at very low levels. But this is not a specific school issue, as I said earlier. This is an issue of the system. This points to failure of policy and the need for us to look at ourselves, to introspect as a country, and to really ask ourselves, what do we want of our children? And how are we supporting them to achieve that? Now, if you look at the grade 4 literacy, the trends, and Senator Crawford is going to go in more detail later on, but to underscore the point that this is not a specific case, it's not an isolated case, we do see that for the grade 4 literacy rates, the numbers have declined drastically from over 80% for much of the years leading up to 2020. We have not recovered. We are not even close to where we were pre-COVID. We are now at around 65%, coming down from over 83%, 85% in 2017, actually 86% in 2015. And now here we are at 65. And so what we're also seeing is that with the PEP scores, PEP reports 67% of students proficient or highly proficient in language arts. And this, of course, is misleading if you take it in the context of what schools are reporting and in the context of Pembroke Hall, the case that we're discussing. Because if 70% are reading proficiently, then why are we seeing such a vast number of schools receiving entire cohorts that are functionally illiterate? The hard truth is that many of these students are promoted based on scores, not on skills. And that's something that is fundamentally different and something that we need to look at. Reading as compared or juxtaposed against literacy, which is where we want our children to be. So PEP may be showing gains numerically, but the skills that are required for children to function, especially post-PEP, are not being developed. So they're not reading with fluency, and they're not reading to comprehend. They're not comprehending what they read. So the crisis, however, is only foreshadowing the bigger problems that are happening in the education system. And we know the numbers for CSEC, less than 20%, actually just about 18%, are achieving the minimum requirement of 5 subjects with mathematics and English. And so we have to, again, ask ourselves, is this about the children, or is it about a system which is failing our children? So for us, as the People's National Party, we're saying enough is enough. And there's a need for us to take another look, but also to strategize differently about the issue of reading and literacy. And so some of the ideas which we've put on the table, we've said under a PNP government, our focus will be on ensuring that children are reading by grade 3. Because we know from the global studies that The measure of learning poverty is focused on 10-year-olds. So we want children reading with comprehension by the time they reach 10-year-old, which is around the grade 3, grade 4 mark. And so it is important for global comparison that we have standards within our system which are ensuring that our children read by grade 3. We also will invest. We know that a number of our children, significant portion of them, need assessments to ensure that they're developing appropriately and can get the support they need. But these children have to wait, in some cases, over a year to access these services. This is unacceptable. And we intend to make the investments required so that children who have a learning disability can get the support they require in a timely manner. We also intend to mobilize our communities, because this is not only about the school, not only about the ministry, it's also about us as a people. And so through our work with the Social Development Commission, parents, and other civil society organizations, this is how we're going to break the back of this challenge. We must come together as we've done in the past. You may recall our experience with Jamal and the like. We can do it if we pull together, and that's going to be a significant role, a significant part of the reform under a PNP government. But we must be honest with ourselves. The current system is not working for students, not working for teachers, and certainly not working for Jamaica's future. And so our PNP government will act with urgency, with compassion, and clarity, all of which, I dare say, are absent at the moment from what we're seeing, and as you will hear more later on. We intend to rebuild the foundations of our education system and give every Jamaican child a real chance of succeeding, starting with the ability to read, because so much of what you are able to achieve in the system rests on your ability to read. As I said at the beginning, we cannot build a knowledge economy if our children cannot read. And we cannot build a just and fair society if we continue to fail the most vulnerable. With that, I'll stop and ask my colleague, Senator Crawford, to address you. Thank you.
As was indicated by Dr. Russell, the most recent conversation has caused a knee-jerk reaction from the government to indicate that this is a new phenomenon. However, we draw the public's attention or remind the public of some other realities that we have had reports about in more recent times, not the least of which is Holy Trinity High School, that indicated that more than 90% of the children at Holy Trinity 7th grade was reading below their grade level. That seemed to have been dwarfed by the new information of Pembroke, which indicates that 70% are reading below the grade level. Since then, because of public conversation, we have seen a mad scamper from the Ministry of Education to speak of multiple forms of intervention that they are planning on doing, the most recent of which is a reading workshop with teachers, announced just this morning in the newspapers. This is for a problem that has been long existing. It is the intention, therefore, of my presentation to expose the reality behind our official education data and move it past just the recent concerns of Pembroke only. There has been a pattern of underperformance in the last decade under the Jamaica Labour Party. Our 2024 PEP results would have indicated that 13,416 students did not achieve proficiency in mathematics. That is 13,416. Additionally, in English language, 11,098 did not achieve basic proficiency in English language. The average cohort is between 33 and 36,000 students. Cumulative over the period 2016 to current, 95,000 Jamaican students have not achieved proficiency in mathematics in the last 9 years, over 95,000. Our CSEC pass rates have also dropped. Indeed, in 2015, 5 subjects, including math and English, was 25.6%, 26% if we were to round up. For 2024, it was 18%. So therefore, at the end, the cumulative collective test of CXC at the end of your school experience in Jamaica, we have seen a 7 percentage points drop since 2015, from 25.5% in 2015 to current 18% in 2024. This might sound alarming to many, but if you should look at our literacy results, this has also fallen from 86% in 2015 to 67% in 2024. My colleague spoke to the fact that we are seeing high numbers as 70%, which means 70% have not attained, and in the case of Holy Trinity, over 90%. And this may be because of the method of placement that we have employed, for which there is a concentration of those who have not performed in some schools and a concentration of those who have performed in other schools. This creates a challenge, but also an opportunity for targeted intervention into the spaces and schools that have these issues. I would posit, without fear of contradiction, that this isn't happening at Kingston College or Campion. This, however, has been met with general misunderstanding and misrepresentation and misinformation from the government. More recently, I saw an article in this is the radio, not the newspaper, on the radio, and I'll speak to it, Nationwide FM, that had a headline, majority of Pembroke students reading at their grade level. When you looked into the body of the article, it said 70 out of 200 were reading from grade 6 to 9. These are 7th grade students. That's less than 35%. So therefore, that headline could not reflect what was reported. It also brought to my attention that why would you group 6 to 9 when there is no 7th grader at the 6th grade level? So 6th grade is also reading below the grade level. Why would you group that? And even in grouping that, it was not up to standard. The Prime Minister himself seems to misunderstand the issues and have misquoted absenteeism as truancy, therefore blaming delinquency over deprivation. For the benefit of the public, absenteeism is when a child is not sent to school through agreement of the parent. Truancy is when a delinquent child, having been sent to school, chooses to what we call bun school in Jamaica. So therefore, that unappreciation of deprivation does not recognize that the lack of lunch money, the lack of taxi fare, the inability to afford, child labor on a Friday, rain and its impact on attending, are all reasonable realities to be considered as versus just the choice not to attend school. Including, more recently, the minister, in her knee-jerk reaction, have announced some things that she suggests will change the realities that we face. One of which is a $1 billion breakfast plan. If we look into the numbers, we will recognize that the proposal of $1 billion for 69,000 students over 190 days is only $76 per day. To do the research this morning, I tried to find something for $76. Can you indicate? Now, I have two things here, and both of them are not 76. Each of them, in and of itself, covers 76. In Parliament, when the announcement was made, I asked the minister, what was, well, it's one at a time, so don't make it look like they're getting two things. In Parliament, I asked the minister, what was the nutritional benefit that she expected from this allocation? Sounds not at $1 billion. She said 33% of their daily caloric requirement. There's no way in Jamaica that $76 can carry the daily caloric, 33% of the caloric intake necessary for our students. Indeed, it proves, therefore, that this simply is a political announcement seeking to counter the proposals made by the People's National Party in our budget presentations, when we indicated that we would provide meals up to $400 for children and would move towards breakfast. Nowhere in the budget presentations, nowhere in the budget was there an indication of an increased allocation of this $1 billion. Additionally, this $1 billion proves to be immaterial, as there's over 130,000 students on path and almost 240,000 estimated to have challenges with food by the research that was made, some more grave than others. We therefore ask the government, on what basis would they select, just from the path 130,000, which 69 receives breakfast? And additionally, on what basis do they perceive that $76 is sufficient? The minister then went on a media campaign to suggest that she's putting in reading as a mandated part for grade 1 and grade 3. This is a redundant mandate, as reading has already been a central part of the curriculum. It is already included in the national standards curriculum, therefore showing a general unfamiliarity with the existing policies of the government. Additionally, the proposal put forward by the minister seem not to understand the results and data that currently exist. I claim to show that in the last multiple years, the problem isn't reserved to grades 1 and 3, which is what the minister indicated, that she would mandate reading from grades 1 to 3. I draw your attention to the PISA report in 2020. This is an international literacy report on Jamaica. It suggested that only 1% of our 9th grade students was at the top level of reading, and 50% was below the most basic level of reading. This is in the 9th grade. I asked the minister how mandating reading from 1 to 3 solves this particular problem. I then started to analyze by looking back at the grade 4 literacy results for that particular 9th grade, which should have been 2018. The grade 4 literacy results suggested in 2018 that it was 83% mastery. There is some disconnect that is happening if the same students that did the PISA in 2022 was at 50%, but our local examination in 2018 was 83%. It implies, therefore, that there either is learning loss or inflated local early results. A massive disconnect exists that has not been mentioned, not been researched, and not been identified by the current government and their implementation. It seems, therefore, that there are 3 levels of intervention that is necessary and immediate. The first is to review the plumbing with an overall systematic review of the failures within education. The second is to stop the leak, to fix primary school gaps. And the third is to mop up the flood, to provide remedial support for our high school students. As I said earlier, over 95,000 students have failed the basic proficiency in the last 10 years at the PEP level. We look at the 2024 PEP outcomes, which I have already indicated. So we now look at the grade 4 literacy for 2024. As indicated by Dr. Russell, a dramatic drop in the local results to 67%. Therefore, the political posturing of breakfast announcements and redundant reading mandates cannot be accepted as normal and a method to go forward. What does review the plumbing means? The education system needs a structural overhaul. We must fix the block pipelines that prevent opportunity, focus on absenteeism, nutrition, technology, teachers, retention of our teachers, and remedial and extended learning. As far as absenteeism goes, our national absenteeism was celebrated recently at 22%. That's the average absenteeism in Jamaica. Chronic absenteeism is defined as 10%. So global definition of chronic absenteeism likely to have grave impact on education outcomes is at 10%. We recently celebrated a return to pre-COVID levels at 22%. Rural areas are up to 40%. No matter how much reading you mandate in school, an absent student cannot achieve the benefits. What are some of the causes? No transport, no meals, unsafe routes, distance from schools, home duties, etc. The JMP plan to put 50 buses, or I've heard more recently 100 buses, is an untargeted approach that is unlikely to solve the transportation problems. Indeed, if you look at a situation that exists currently with a bus from Linstead to Spanish Town, a 50-seater bus may do 2 trips, that's 100 students. There's no targeting of who's most in need, and there's no method of suggesting that it can be for the general persons coming from the interlands. And so from Linstead to Spanish Town speaks nothing of persons coming from Ty Dixon, which is the spokes of the communities, or coming from up in Wandibolas, etc. So this area that moves from central hub to central hub have no impact on the students coming from the interlands of our society, which are the most impacted by absenteeism. It also targets very few students as compared to the PMP's plan of 20,000 students being impacted by $2,500 per week. This $2,500 per week will be used to subsidize motor vehicles to go into communities less traveled by public transportation, but also to be identified by the principal and the guidance counselors to be having absenteeism issues and need for government's intervention. The government also has a current nutrition program called Path Meals for $180 per day. This has led to many schools only offering 3 days per week and others having segregated path lines with different lunch lines and different meals for students on the PATH program, meaning to segregation in our schools. The PMP, on the contrary, has indicated that we believe a reasonable amount is $400 per student, and it should go way past the PATH program to include the 56% that research have shown to have food insecurity in Jamaica. It covers lunch with dignity and proper nutrition, likely to cover the 33% of the caloric intake that international standards have implied. We also see that technology and AI is a force multiplier. An example of this is speaking to the police force. If they have motor vehicle, one police officer can cover much more area because it multiplies the force. We believe that AI tutors, homeschool apps, digital textbooks, where you can purchase or use 1 chapter per time, AI grading and feedback tools, curriculum tracking and adaptive testing are very important in moving forward. One of the greatest benefits of AI is that it allows for a test at each end of each part of the curriculum, causing for you to have evening intervention, weekend intervention, and summer remediation before the end of the year or the end of the term. One of the negatives that we have, and my able colleague here has indicated, that we are promoting students in spite of them not having achieved the necessary levels of performance. And this is so because at the end of the year, when you do the test, you recognize their incompetence at the end of the year, and they therefore need remediation for a year. If you do it at the end of the curriculum activities, let's say additional fractions, you don't understand that, then we're going to do evening, then we're going to do this weekend, then that remediation will cause for earlier intervention and the less competition for spaces as they move forward. And AI will allow for that constant and consistent testing that we see. And I must indicate that we have heard the current minister speak to AI, so that is one aspect I think that she might be onto something and getting right. The teacher retention is of great concern. We estimate that over 1,000 more teachers will leave this year, and teacher migration is only rising. No other political party has indicated, other than the People's National Party, of a need for a teacher retention plan. We are losing some of our more experienced teachers, and we're also losing facilitators of learning, with many schools starting and continuing for periods of months at a time without teachers to facilitate. There is also a challenge and a concern that the nation must accept that the new method the JLP has proposed to have specialist teachers of math and science and language in the primary schools may create additional shortages in areas such as mathematics, because with over 870 schools, you may not be able to find specialist mathematics teachers for all these schools. The teacher retention plan we had proposed include easier access to housing, concessions for motor vehicles for staying in the classroom, student loan forgiveness for each year that a teacher stays in the classroom, subsidized internet as a tool of trade, and improved staff rooms and classroom for improved environment and teaching experience. The extended learning structure for recovery, we're looking at evening and morning sessions, weekend reinforcement, pull-out classes, summer school and summer camps, and tech-supported extended days to ensure that the children are reading, are performing up to their weekly level and not just to their yearly level. Therefore, we also put forward our literacy plan, which we have suggested on multiple occasions. There are three problems with one crisis: the leak, the breakdown in the foundational literacy, the lack of original and early exposure, the flood, functional illiteracy at the secondary level. We must therefore fix both the root and the branches at the same time. It should be indicated that 75% of brain function is developed by the age of 3. Yet, organized and structural intervention in education starts at 3, after the majority of brain functioning has been developed. The government generally starts at primary level, age 6, when 90% of brain function is developed by age 5. Government intervention, therefore, may be late at this particular point in time. The former Minister of Education, Will Reid, once mentioned something called brain builder centers. And because of the constraints of the budget and eventually because of his removal, we have heard nothing further from a brain builder center. The brain builder center was supposed to target the first 3 years of the child's development, an infant brain builder center. To my information, he only built 3. We believe that it is possible for us to build 1,000 centers for brain builders, the age 1.5 to 3. Now, many will ask, how would we afford it? But we have already contacted many of the churches who are not engaged in activities in the midweek. And they have indicated, some of these churches, that they'll be very willing to participate by allowing their church halls to be donated as brain builder centers. That can immediately cause for that interaction and interface. We want a support system where Heart Trust will start to train brain builder facilitators or infant facilitators with daily digital curriculum guide and videos showcasing best practices and also ensuring that there is a general experience across the island. The PMP will also implement a free app that indicates to parents a homeschool curriculum from birth until age 3, indicating and simulating simulation, bonding, and learning prompts, supporting families, especially in the underserved communities. We also see that there's a problem of weak literacy foundation in our primary schools. We believe that one of the interventions necessary is a review of our education structure. Our current education structure is a 3-6-3-2 structure: 3 basic school, 6 primary school, 3 lower secondary school, and 2 upper secondary school. We believe that we need a 3-4-2-3-2 structure. This would mean that the 6 at the primary level will be divided into 4 and 2, lower primary and upper primary, with the 4 focusing and concentrating on literacy, numeracy, spoken English, and creativity. The leader of the PMP have consistently stated that English is not the first language of many Jamaicans, and therefore they must be exposed to English as a new language, because many are patois speakers, patois exposed in their original circumstances. Grades 5 upper primary will be for general knowledge and rounded exposure. The entire 6 years currently is more focused, it seems, on rounded exposure. It would mean that teachers at lower primary would have specialized in lower primary education, and teachers at the upper primary would have specialized in upper primary education. The current teachers, of course, would be grandfathered in with the necessary trainings put in place, free of cost to these teachers, for them to be lower primary specialists or upper primary specialists. We also suggest that in conversations with the JTA and the teachers, that we review how teachers move with their students, and suggest that teachers should move throughout the cohort, with the cohort throughout the phase. And so therefore, if you are a lower primary teacher, you will move from grade 1 to grade 4. So you'll go grade 2 with your students, grade 3 with your students, and grade 4 with your students, and start again the next year with a new grade 1 and move through the cohort. Removing the ability to say, oh, grade 1 never teach them good, or grade 3, and I don't know how them reach a grade 4. And you also learn the student better, you understand their idiosyncrasies, and you are better able to carry them through the phase. A new teacher will then take them to grade 5 and carry them through the PEP phase of grade 5 and 6. We feel that that would create systematically the outcomes of literacy in our Jamaican system. It leads to greater accountability, and it allows for our teachers to create greater bonds and relationships with not just the children, but the families that they are interfacing with. We then look at the flood that we have at the secondary school. Thousands of secondary students are functionally illiterate. The strategy must therefore reflect what I have identified in my history lessons of how the US tried to achieve the manifest destiny. They had an approach of a fort and the soldiers and the fort. We believe that the Jamaica Foundation for Lifelong Learning should be reimagined to be a general literacy agency and not just an adult literacy agency. We believe that we can have an army of literacy teachers, approximately 2,000 literacy teachers seconded to the Jamaica Foundation for Lifelong Learning, with their main duty to be intervention into schools such as Holy Trinity and schools such as Pembroke Hall. Again, I want to highlight one of the concerns I have, for example, and I applaud the church for their intervention, Grace Bastian and others such as those, intervention in Holy Trinity 7th grade. But that ignores that there's a problem that has existed before and now in the 8th grade, the 9th grade, and the 10th grade, also the 11th grade. And I don't believe that a society can basically give up on those by only having 7th grade intervention. So therefore, they will be seconded for 2 terms of 3 years. They can review if they want to continue their secondment after the first term. Those schools will have longer work days, shorter holidays, and intensive teaching methods. What we have recognized as well is that the targeted interventions in schools such as Holy Trinity seem to have ignored that the feeder schools into Holy Trinity need also to have intervention. And so therefore, when we're targeting Holy Trinity, there will be simultaneous intervention into the feeder schools of Holy Trinity, the primary schools in close proximity that have the majority of students coming into Holy Trinity, Pembroke Hall, and schools such as those. In fact, the problem is so grave that former Minister Ronnie Twaits in an article on Sunday indicates that there's approximately 50 such secondary schools that are having the issues that we are decrying for Holy Trinity. 50 of the total primary schools will be approximately 40%, almost reflecting what the results are of 67%, therefore 33% having not achieved mastery. We look at having student consolidated hubs and the goal of moving 8 to 12 literacy stages over the 4 terms. Now, many would ask, what is 4 terms? The current school system is 3 terms, and the summer, which is the 4th term. And we believe that if we're going to immediately reverse some of the issues, those schools with great intervention would have to have the summer term as a necessary part. We have seen the research coming out of downtown, Denham Town, with the intervention from Portmore. But I'll remember the name soon. But there's been an intervention in Denham Town, and there's been an intervention in Holy Trinity. In Denham Town, they're seeing in 1 term 3 to 5 movement in literacy, 3 to 5 years of movement, and in Holy Trinity, they're seeing up to 3 years so far of movement. Therefore, the research is showing that within 4 terms, we can have up to 12 years of movement. So we want to have a remedial 7 eventually, but a general interface with those schools that are having concentration of persons with literacy problems. We believe that in that period, over the next 5 to 6 years, we can do 200 primary schools and up to 40 secondary schools, changing the circumstances. The teachers that were then seconded to the Jamaica Foundation for Lifelong Learning will then be returned as early primary teachers to ensure that this problem does not persist. In summary, we believe that it is necessary for a fulsome review and holistic approach to our literacy problem, and not a knee-jerk reaction with PR announcements whenever there is a public outcry due to a report in the newspapers or any other aspect of the media. I thank you, and we will open the floor for questions. You would recognize, even from the article on Sunday about Pembroke, that the principal indicate that there is a waiting list of up to 4 years for persons to be assessed. There have been persons identified in grade 2 that have graduated at grade 6 without being effectively assessed. Our initial procedure is to move assessment to at least each Cornwall, Middlesex, and Surrey, and then to try and have an assessment eventually, 1 per parish, to increase that level of assessment. There are some aspects of the assessment at the psychological diagnoses that will need to offer scholarships to individuals so as to increase the pool of persons available for that particular diagnosis. There's also a basis for working with the private sector for that public-private partnership for an agreed cost. Many have had highfalutin costs up to $200,000. So subsidized costs, agreed costs, and subsidized methods of payment that may be able to be extended over time for persons who want to go the private route. So those are the 3 strategies we believe that can immediately mitigate against some of that.
And just to add that there's obviously a policy dimension here, because the point around the professionals that are required, the expertise that are required, because you can't, it's not just to build the physical spaces, you need the expertise. And so the government has to take responsibility, because they would have a role in ensuring that we can access the personnel, whether it is to train them or to form partnerships with friendly governments, Cuba, etc., in order to get that the kind of professionals we need to support this service. So it's really important that it be looked at holistically, but also that we look at the preparation of the personnel, but the policy implementation, the policy decisions which need to be made to bring these personnel in a relatively short period of time, right?
Yes. And I want to add as well, in addition to your question, that there are also children that are not disabled, but dysfunctional because of adverse child experiences. And so therefore there is a need also for schools for special attention to those children that have had adverse child experiences. The murder rates, for example, have caused for many of our children to have adverse child experiences, both family, friends, communities. The domestic abuse have caused for many to have adverse child experiences. Hunger and the inability to satisfy that, the broken homes. So there's a lot of children that are not going to be diagnosed as disabled, but their dysfunction is based on the adverse child experiences. And they are within our concepts, schools that we can have persons taken out for 3 months, 6 months, whatever is needed for the necessary specialists to carry them past that dysfunction.
Any more questions?
Julian Robinson said that in the next PMP term, Jamaica will see full literacy. How realistic is that?
Well, if what we have indicated at this particular point in time is implemented, I believe it's extremely realistic. We have indicated, first of all, that we will ensure that a child born capable remains capable by developing the necessary brain functions in the initial phases. So that is one step that I think that is not being identified at this particular point in time. We have identified, secondly, that we would review the structure of education to cause for a lower primary structure focused on literacy removing. So one of the things that people don't understand is that you can focus on literacy and introduce science. So science in the reading, this is the type of reading, but your focus is on the reading, the word identification, the comprehension. And many of our students, for example, may be at a higher level of word recognition and a lower level of comprehension. And so therefore their literacy rate is lower than just their word identification. They can read a mat on the cat, but not recognize immediately that a mat should not be on the cat, and it should be reversed, that it should be the cat on the mat. So therefore, we have identified that focus as a structural change in our education structure. If that is implemented, we think that also would assist. We have indicated a willingness to speak to our teachers to move with their cohort, causing for greater familiarity, causing for intervention to that I don't have to relearn the student over that 4-year period, causing for a greater relationship with the parents and connection with the community, the child's direct community. We feel that that would cause for also a greater ability to assess the teacher's performance within that, with that cohort and what they do. We think that that will also improve and change. We have indicated that we'll try and change some of the structural problems with the nation as it relates to availability of nutrition by increasing it almost twofold, in fact, more than twofold, from 180 to 400, and increasing the number of beneficiaries, because poverty isn't binary. It's not that if you're on part, you're poor, but you're on the fringe of part, you're not poor. So there are many persons that have 2-day difficulty, 3-day difficulty, and not all-day difficulty, and because they're not on part, they don't benefit. We decided we move it to 56%, which is the people that are found to have food insecurity. That's what the research has indicated. We have indicated that we're going to ensure that they're at school by talking to the principal, talking to the guidance counselors, having that information coming to the ministry, sending out those specialists to go and analyze what are the transportation difficulties, and have a targeted transportation subsidy of up to 20,000 students to make sure that they are present for the consumption of education. We have indicated we want to retain our best teachers. If all of those things happen, we believe what Julian has said is 100% possible. And again, you have asked a wonderful question about the persons who are disabled, which are not the highest percentage of persons. So therefore, disability cannot explain 33% not achieving literacy, because our disability rates are not to that level. If we should use the level. But those who are disabled, we want to identify. Those who are having adverse child experiences, we want to identify. If these things are implemented, I believe that it is very probable that we will move from 18% to 80% in our CXC outcomes. And I believe that near 100% literacy is possible.
Good morning, Sandy Williams from
Hi, Sandy.
TVJ. Just want you to clarify the difference between the PMP's proposed EASE program and what we currently have, which is the National School Feeding Program and PATH.
Okay. So the current program only targets the children on PATH, which is about 130,000. With 440,000 children in school, 56% is almost 230,000. So one of the differences is that there's over 100,000 more children that will benefit from the EASE program as versus the current program. The second reality is that the current PATH program of $180 per child, our program suggests $400 per child, on the simple basis that for the caloric intake of school feeding, which is an international standard of 33% of the caloric daily requirement, $180 is incapable of doing that. And so therefore we are saying $400 for each student. That also removes the necessity of separation, because all you do is to pay for the lunch that the person is consuming, as versus giving him the PATH lunch, which is rice and chicken food, and then somebody else another lunch, leading to many on PATH to be embarrassed to participate in the PATH lunch. And that has created also a further problem. What we have indicated as the People's National Party is that generally, and there's a nutritional policy put forward by the government, because you don't have to do nothing to fail. The government have done some things, but they're still failing dramatically. I've had students with 15%, they've done 15% right, but they have failed. You'll know at the university, 40%, but you still fail. So they have a nutrition policy, but there needs to be a mandate of what is to be consumed in the schools. The nutritional value, because there are people with funds are able to purchase. that are still malnourished because they're buying tickets for more than $76. So to that extent, we believe that the major difference is the number of persons to benefit, over 100,000 more. The cost that is assigned, 200%, 100% more, $400 to $180. The caloric intake that it will cover a higher caloric intake, and the type of meal that we'll be able to offer, which would be a more nutritious meal. Those are the major differences between what currently exists and what we propose.
Thank you. Any questions online? No questions online. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Senator Crawford and Dr. Russell. And I'd just like to tell everybody good afternoon. All the best for the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.